right, so today I'm going to continue my reading of Maniac, Magee. We're on chapter 6. So I just refresh your memory about what happened in the first 5 chapters. So we met Jeffrey Lionel Magee, otherwise known as Maniac Magee, later on in the book. He had run away from home. A year later, we don't know, it's called the lost year. We have no idea what happened to him in this year. But he showed up in Two Mills, in the city of Two Mills, or the town of Two Mills, and he met a girl named Amanda. And Amanda gave him a book, which he begged her to give him a book out of her suitcase full of books, and she did that. And then he ran off with said book, and he did a whole bunch of different things with that book in his hands. The first thing he did was he intercepted a pass that was being thrown by some high school football players while they were practicing, and then proceeded to not only intercept it, catch it, but to throw a perfect pass back to, I believe, the receiver, but I'd have to double check that part. But he threw a pass back, and then he managed to rescue Arnold Jones, or we don't know if that's his name, but that's what he was called in the story, Arnold Jones, from the Finsterwalds, which is a dreaded place that no kids want to go, the Finsterwalds backyard. And he jumped over the fence to save that kid, Arnold Jones, and then put him on the front step, and then he sat down on the front step of Finsterwalds and read his book, started reading his book. So that's where we leave Maniac, or the story of Maniac Magee. Chapter 6. About an hour later, Mrs. Valerie Pickwell twanged open her back screen door, stood on the step, and whistled. As whistles go, Miss Pickwell's was one of the all-time greats. It reeled in every Pickwell kid for dinner every night. Never was a Pickwell kid ever late for dinner. It's a record that will probably stand forever. The whistle wasn't loud, it wasn't screechy, it was a simple 2-note job, one high note, one low. To an outsider, it wouldn't sound all that special, but to the ears of a Pickwell kid, it was magic. Somehow it had the ability to slip through the slush of 5 o'clock noises to reach its targets. So, from the dump, from the creek, from the tracks, from Red Hill, in ran the Pickwell kids for dinner, all 10 of them. Add to that the parents, baby Dee Dee, grandmother and grandfather Pickwell, great-grandfather Pickwell, and down-and-out taxi driver whom Mr. Pickwell was helping out. The Pickwells were always helping out somebody. All that, and you had what Mrs. Pickwell called her small nation. Only a ping pong table was big enough to seat them all, and that's what they ate around. Dinner was spaghetti. In fact, every third night, dinner was spaghetti. When dinner was over and they were all bringing their dirty dishes to the kitchen, Dominic Pickwell said to Duke Pickwell, "Who's that kid?" "What kid?" said Duke. "The kid next to you at the table." "I don't know. I thought Donald knew him." "I don't know him," said Donald. "I thought Dion knew him." "Never saw him," said Dion. "I figured he was Deidre's new boyfriend." Deidre kicked Dion in the shins. Duke checked back in the living room. "He's gone." The Pickwell kids dashed out the back door to the top of Rico Hill. They scanned the railroad tracks. There he was, passing Red Hill, a book in his hand. He was running, passing the spear field now, and the Pickwell kids had to blink and squint and shade their eyes to make sure they were seeing it right, because the kid wasn't running the cinders alongside the tracks or on the wooden ties. No, he was running where the Pickwells themselves, where every other kid had only ever walked, on the steel rail itself. Chapter 7. When Jeffrey Magee was next spotted, it was at the Little League field in the park. A Little League game had just ended. The Red Sox had won, but the big story was John McNabb, who struck out 16 batters to set a new Two Mills LL record, Little League record. McNabb was a giant. He stood 5'8", and he was said to weigh over 170 pounds. He had to bring his birth certificate into the league director to prove that he was only 12, and still most people didn't believe it. The point is, the rest of the league was no match for McNabb. It wouldn't have been so bad if he'd been a right fielder, but he was a pitcher. And there was only one pitch he ever threw, a fastball. Most of the batters never saw it. They just heard it whizzing past their noses. You could see their knees shaking from the stands. One poor kid stood there long enough to hear strike one go past and then threw up all over home plate. It was still pretty light out because when there are a lot of strikeouts, a game goes fast, and McNabb was still on the mound even though the official game was over. He figured he'd made baseball history and he wanted to stretch it out as long as he could. There were still about 10 players around, Red Soxers and Green Soxers, and McNabb was making them march up to the plate and take their swings. There was no catcher. The ball just zoomed to the backstop, and when a kid struck out, he went to the end of the line. McNabb was loving it. After each whiff, he laughed and bellowed the strikeout total. 26, 27, 28. He was like a shark. He had the bloodlust. The victims were hunched and trembling, walking at the gangplank. 34, 35. And then somebody new stepped up to the plate. Just a punky, runty little kid. No Red Sox or Green Sox uniform, kind of scraggly, with a book, which he laid down on home plate. He scratched out a footing in the batter's box, cocked the bat on his shoulder, and stared at McNabb. McNabb croaked from the mound. "Get out of there, runt. This is a Little League record. You ain't in Little League." The kid walked away. Was he chickening out? No, he was lifting a red cap from the next batter in line and he put it on, and then he was back in the box. McNabb almost fell off the mound. He was laughing so hard. "Okay, runt, number 36 coming up." McNabb fired. The kid swung. The batters in line automatically turned their eyes to the backstop where the ball should be, but it wasn't there. It was in the air, riding on a beeline right out to McNabb's head, the same line it came in on, only faster. McNabb froze, then flinched just in time. The ball missed his head, but nipped the bill of his cap and sent it spinning like a flying saucer out to the shortstop. The ball landed in the second base dust and rolled away to the fence in center field. Dead silence. Nobody moved. McNabb was gaping at the kid who was still standing there, all calm and cool, waiting for the next pitch. Finally, a sort of grin slithered across McNabb's lips. He roared, "Get my hat. Get the ball." 10 kids scrambled onto the field, bringing him the hat and the ball. McNabb had it figured now. He was so busy laughing at the runt, he lobbed him a lollipop, and the runt got lucky and pulled it. This time, McNabb wasn't laughing. He fingered the ball, tips digging into the red stitching. He wound, he fired, he thought, "Man, that sucker's going so fast I can hardly see it." And then he was looking up, turning, following the flight of the ball, which finally came down to earth in deep left center field and bounced once to the fence. More silence, except from someone who yelled, "Yip!" then caught himself. "Ball!" bellowed McNabb. He was handed the ball. He slammed his hat to the ground. His nostrils flared. He was breathing like a picadored bull. He windmilled, reared, lunged, fired. This time the ball cleared the fence on the fly. No more holding back. The other kids cheered. Somebody ran for the ball, and they were anxious now for more. 3 more pitches, 3 more home runs. Pandemonium on the sidelines. It was raining red and green hats. McNabb couldn't stand it. The next time he threw, it was right at the kid's head. The kid ducked. McNabb called, "Strike one." Next pitch headed for the kid's belt. The kid bent his stomach around the ball. "Strike two." Strike three took dead aim at the kid's knees, and here was the kid swooping back and at the same time swatting at the ball like a golfer teeing off. It was the craziest baseball swing you ever saw. But there was the ball smoking out to center field. "Hold it, runt," snarled McNabb. "I can't pitch when I got a whiz." The kids on the sidelines made way as McNabb stomped off the field, past the dugout, and into the woods between the field and the creek. They waited a pretty long time, but they figured, well, McNabb's whiz probably would last longer than a regular kid's, might even make the creek rise. At last, McNabb was back on the mound, fingering the ball in his glove, a demon's gleam in his eye. He wound up, fired, the ball headed for the plate, and what's this, a leg ball? It's got legs, long legs, pinwheeling toward the plate. It wasn't a ball at all. It was a frog, and McNabb was on the mound, cackling away, and the kid at the plate was bug-eyed. Nobody'd ever tried to hit a fast frog before. So what'd the kid do? He bunted it. He bunted the frog, laid down a perfect bunt in front of the plate, third base side, and he took off for first. He was halfway to second before McNabb jolted himself into action. The kid was trying for an inside the park home run bunt, the rarest feat in baseball, something that had hardly ever been done with a ball and never with a frog. And to be the pitcher who let such a thing happen, well, McNabb could already feel his strikeout record fading to a mere grain in the sandlot of history. So he lumbered off the mound after the frog, which was now hopping down the third base line. As a matter of fact, it was so close to the line that McNabb had a brilliant idea. Just herd the frog across the line and it would be a foul ball or frog, which is what he tried to do with his foot. But the frog, instead of taking a left turn at the shoe, jumped over it and hopped on toward third base. He was heading for the green fields of left, and the runt kid, sounding like two runners with his flap soled slapping on the bottom of his feet, was chucking dust for third. Only one hope now. McNabb had to grab the frog and tag the runner out, but now the frog shot through his legs over to the mound and now toward shortstop and now toward second, and McNabb was lurching and lunging, throwing his hat at the frog, throwing his glove, and everybody was screaming, and the kid was rounding third and digging for home, and unbefroggable, the ball was heading back home too. The ball, the batter, the pitcher, all racing for home plate, and it was the batter, the new kid out of nowhere, who crossed the plate first at the same time, scooping up his book, twirling his borrowed red cap back to the cheering others, and jogging on past the empty stands and up the hill to the boulevard. McNabb, gasping, croaking after him, "Don't stop till you're out of town, runt, and don't let me ever catch ya." And that's how Jeffrey Magee knocked the world's first frog ball for a four-bagger. Chapter 8. And how he came to be called Maniac. The town was buzzing. The schools were buzzing. Hallways, lunchrooms, streets, playgrounds, West End, East End, buzzing about the new kid in town, the stranger kid, scraggly, carrying a book, flap-soled sneakers, the kid who intercepted Brian Dennehy's pass to hands down and punted it back longer than Dennehy himself ever threw it. Oh, he punted it back. My bad. I said that wrong in the at the beginning, my little summary. I said he threw it back. He punted it back. The kid who rescued Arnold Jones from Finsterwald's backyard. The kid who tattooed Giant John McNabb's fastball for a half dozen home runs and then circled the sacks on a bunted frog. Nobody knows who said it first, but somebody must have. Kid's gotta be a maniac. Somebody else must have said, yeah, regular maniac. And somebody else, yeah. And that was it. Nobody, except Amanda Beale, had any other name for him. So pretty soon, when they wanted to talk about the new kid, that's what they called him, Maniac. The legend had a name, but not an address, at least not an official one with numbers. What he did have was the deer shed at the Elmwood Park Zoo, which is where he slept his first few nights in town. What the deer ate, especially the carrots, apples, and day-old hamburger buns, he ate. He started reading Amanda Beale's book his second day in town and finished it that afternoon. Ordinarily, he would have returned it immediately, but he was so fascinated by the story of the Children's Crusade that he kept it and read it the next day and the next. When he wasn't reading, he was wandering. When most people wander, they walk. Maniac ran. Around town, around the nearby townships, always carrying the book, keeping it in perfect condition. This is what he was doing when his life, as it often seemed to do, took an unexpected turn. Okay, we're going to stop reading there. There are no vocabulary or comprehension questions for these 3 chapters. Trying to break it up so we're just reading, enjoying the story part of the time, and then doing comprehension or vocabulary for the other part. This technique the author is using here at the end is called foreshadowing. It's giving us a little glimpse, a little hint that something big is going to happen in Maniac's life. Something different is going to happen. Something is going to be changing for him very soon, and for the town of Two Mills in general. And a lot of the characters that we've already read about slowly get changed as the story continues too. So we will keep reading. I hope you enjoyed those 3 chapters of Maniac Magee.